Greetings, everyone. It is GleeCon back in the flesh. Well, in the flesh for me, on screen for you. And I'm here with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last one, and it's been a couple days. My apologies to that, viewers. It's a little bit dense time for me. I do, in addition to all the other hats I wear and all the juggling I do, I am a head coach. I run a pretty big size program, and it's the middle of peak game season right now. So sometimes I'm out coaching, like I'm gone 14-hour days. I'm out like by the time work's done, coaching's done. So those couple days, it's going to be like that for not this next week. Will be good the next week. I'm going to crank out a lot of content over the next week, but then after that, it's going to be about 3 weeks where there's just some days where I have to go radio silent. But I'll try to front load that with a bunch of good stuff to get you through that time. We were doing Silver Pine Forest last time. On the last episode, we ran through in World of Warcraft Classic, and we found out a little bit more about what's causing this werewolf curse, and also started to kind of see how the Dalaran mages are kind of cramping the style of the Forsaken. Did some of our first forays against the humans. Although I'm guessing those NPCs are probably hostile, even if you are human. So it's weird that the Dalaran mages are probably a hostile faction. We've also been reading the Horde Player's Guide. We're going to jump back in. We're finishing up the 7th chapter. This is the last set. This has been a nice lore-heavy chapter. This one's called Threats to the Horde. And we are going to, read this one out, and then we'll be done with chapter 7, and we'll have a few RP-heavy chapters to wrap it up. So let's read about the threats to the Horde. The Horde has the largest list of allies it ever has, by my estimation, but their enemies are also great in number. Some of the greatest of these enemies spring from their own ranks, such as the Burning Blade and the Shadow Council, which, by the way, seem to be working together. Others are far more ancient, such as the Karaji Empire, which stirs within the sands of Silithus. I'll give a brief rundown of each. Internal threats. The Burning Blade clan has been around since before the Horde came to Azeroth, and even at that time, many of their members bore the taint of demons. It's no surprise, then, that these bastards have turned toward demonic magic and worship. To be clear, the Burning Blade houses members of every occupation, not just warlocks, although I sincerely doubt you'll find any demon-worshipping shaman. The clan is too small these days to pose a direct military threat toward the Horde, and so they settle for infiltration, hoping to undermine the government of Orgrimmar or assassinate Thrall. Not likely to work, but they'll try nonetheless. Most of the big shots are situated in the Ragefire Chasm, which can be accessed through Orgrimmar. They're building up a healthy presence in Desolus too, but I can't fathom why. That place is just so boring, and we're going to be getting to this soon. Probably, I'm strongly thinking that I'm just going to go ahead and run it on the next run. So before I hit the part 4s up, I think I'm going to end up doing Ragefire Chasm. The Burning Blade is one of the many groups that pledges fealty to the much larger and more expansive Shadow Council. The Shadow Council is a real and imminent threat. It controls the majority of Felwood, and its agents work to spread corruption into Ashenvale, Winterspring, Darkshore, and other nearby territories. The Shadow Council is directly supported by the Burning Legion, making them formidable. In fact, some demons even look to the Shadow Council for guidance. With the loss of Archimonde, many demons are like lost evil puppies searching for a new master. Let's read a sidebar about the Burning Blade clan. In the First and Second Wars, the Burning Blade was less a clan and more a group of somewhat organized orcs who had no banner of their own. They were something of a force of nature. These orcs were some of the first to drink the blood of demons and simply wished to kill everything in sight with no regard for their own lives. The other clans used the ogres to keep the Burning Blade in check, lest this clan turn on the rest of the Horde in their permanent state of aggression. In more recent times, the Burning Blade has grown more organized, and they're definitively anti-Horde. The Burning Blade harbors many of those whom Thrall exiled or otherwise refused to incorporate in his new society, such as warlocks and the worst of murderers. The clan has a leader now. Many whisper that he is none other than Niru Fireblade, a warlock residing within the very halls of Orgrimmar. It is unknown if Thrall is aware of his existence or if he intentionally keeps the Burning Blade's leader close to watch his actions. The Burning Blade clan's color is orange. The Shadow Council constantly damages the Horde in an unusual way by hurting its image. There are still humans alive who remember the Shadow Council when it belonged to the Horde in the First and Second Wars, and other groups look upon these demonic thralls and take them as proof that orcs will never truly be free of corruption. The Shadow Council gains strength each day. Nearly every traitor banished from the Horde joins their ranks, and many aspiring warlocks from the Alliance and the Horde alike seek them with a lust for greater power. I'll finish this section with the biggest threat of all, politics. I'm not suggesting Thrall and Sylvanas start holding hands and prancing together, but the Horde isn't going to hold up if the Forsaken continue to serve as an independent group. I'll be honest, I frankly have no idea why Thrall accepted the dead into his proud army in the first place. But it's clear that a lot of orcs and Forsaken alike don't agree with it, and their leaders need to solidify the pact somehow. I'm not suggesting marriage here, but Sylvanas especially needs to do something to demonstrate she can be trusted. And let's read a sidebar about the Shadow Council. The first incarnation of the Shadow Council was put to the sword by Orgrim Doomhammer while Gul'dan lay comatose in the Second War, but a new Shadow Council has formed in recent years. A powerful warlock named Feldon, perhaps a descendant or apprentice of Gul'dan, leads the council in Felwood under the watchful eye of the Dreadlord Banehollow. The new Shadow Council is not part of the Horde, rather it encompasses warlocks and demonic servants of nearly every race. So that's going to be kind of interesting and cool when we get to Felwood to quest around with that. It's important to know that demons are not members of the Shadow Council, either old or new, but warlocks can summon demon minions. Humans form a large part of the current incarnation of the Shadow Council, and there are a few complaints. No members of the old council survive to complain about the changes. In many ways, the Shadow Council remains true to its name, with agents in nearly every city and organization. They learn from the mistakes of their predecessors, however, and these dark conjurers keep a large number of troops in their employ as well as spellcasters. Okay, another threat is the Silithid. We've heard enough about corrupted orcs. There are other groups, sure, but the big ones I've mentioned. The Horde has a lot of enemies left to choose from, so we'll start with the most immediate threat, Silithus. 1,000 years ago, a being of unimaginable power, an old god, is said to have unleashed an army from the southern sands of Kalimdor. The Night Elf Druids rose from their slumber to combat this threat, and along with the Sentinels, they fought these insect-like invaders as the monsters threatened to spread out and engulf the whole of the continent. And we read a short story about that in one of our collections. If you look back at the playlist of the short stories, one of them is about this, that historic Night Elf versus Silithid thing. I don't know all the details yet, although I'll be revisiting Silithus soon to continue my research, but I do know that it was a timely intervention from the bronze dragonflight that salvaged the battle. Other dragons came at their behest, and the Silithid were pushed back. The good guys win, but no one lived happily ever after. Instead, we got a big wall holding the Silithid at bay, and if the Cenarian Circle knows what it's talking about, the wall is not going to last much longer. I've already bashed enough giant wasps and spiders to know that Silithid are starting to tunnel under the wall. Took them long enough to think of that. Well, at any rate, the Silithid are coming, and there are lots of them. You see, the dragons didn't actually wipe them out. Far from it, in fact, in these days, it's hard to assume the dragons have got our back, so it's going to be up to the mortals to handle this one. Considering back in the day it took both of the most massive troll empires just to slow these guys down, I'm not confident about our odds. Maybe we'll look out on the Scourge of the Legion will decide to target them. On second thought, then we'd have an army of undead insects. Damn, that would be nasty. I'll just keep my mouth shut now. That's kind of already what's happening with the Nerubians. I don't know enough about the Silithid invasion to say anything other than kill them until they die. It's important to know that the Twilight's Hammer is supporting them, however, as are some elementals. That definitely makes it seem like an old god is involved. And if that's the case, we're in for a whole new kind of nightmare. Okay, corruption is another threat. Speaking of nightmares, I'll touch on that briefly. The Emerald Dream, the most pristine world imaginable, is being corrupted. Nothing seems safe from this spreading darkness. Recently, several green dragons emerged from the portals in Ashenvale, Feraless, the Hinterlands, and Duskwood. Anger and hatred burned in their eyes, and it's taken many of our greatest adventurers to hold vigil over the portals and slay the poor bastards as they emerge. Something tells me that, as impossible as this may sound, the corrupted dragons are the least of our worries. Something dark is in there. Something truly horrible. Nearly every druid connected to the Emerald Dream suffers as a result. Elf, Tauren, and otherwise. I spoke to Keeper Remulos, the son of Cenarius, while I was writing Lands of Mystery, and he told me that even he could not determine the source of the corruption. One likely suspect is Hakar, not the long-dead Houndmaster of the Burning Legion, mind you, but the Troll Blood God. The ancients sure like to confuse us with repeating names, don't they? For those of you who haven't heard about this bugger yet, he's mean. Hakar came to the ancient trolls and corrupted a group of priests called the Athalai, giving them great power in exchange for sacrifices of, you guessed it, blood. Well, the other trolls didn't fancy that much, and after a terrific war, which is probably why we don't see quite as many trolls these days as the legends indicate, Hakar was sealed off. Temporarily, it would seem. Rumors indicate some foolhardy adventurers were tricked into performing a ritual in the sunken temple of the Athalai that awakened Hakar in the ancient city of Zul'Gurub. That's us. Stupid adventurers. Well, the other trolls responded immediately. In fact, they sent some of their greatest champions, and a fat lot of good it did them. Their super-heroic priests of the ancient troll deities now feed their power to Hakar in their defeat. Isn't that just perfect? Now the legendary Zandalar tribe has set up camp on Yojamba Isle in hopes that some other adventurers will be foolish and powerful enough to try to help them. We don't know what Hakar's plans are yet, but since the Green Dragonflight was watching over his skeleton in the sunken temple, it's safe to say he might be involved in the problems in the Emerald Dream. Perhaps he's the child of an old god? It's hard to say. I don't even know if they can have children. I'm not entirely sure I want to find out either. Okay, let's continue with our little side story, which is, I think, that one in the Undercity. I think we're still reading it. Trevor didn't wait to see if the swordsman had succeeded outside. It wasn't that he was entirely unconcerned, but the former priest had more pressing matters on his mind. In the chaos, the few remaining Forsaken inside the jail paid him little attention. He was nothing but another dead holy man to them. That changed abruptly when he borrowed a dagger from the rack on the wall, jamming the pommel into the skull of the single remaining guard as he walked by. "Hey!" the guard said, starting to stand before Trevor smashed him again, this time fracturing his skull completely. As the guard slumped to the ground, looking dejected in true death, the former priest dropped the weapon in disgust, frowning at the necessity of his actions. One of the prisoners, a dwarf, noticed him slip the keys off the guard's belt. "Hey! You getting us out of here?" A typical dwarf, Trevor thought to himself with what would have been a sigh. "Not everyone," he said with no hint of emotion in his tone. He walked past the dwarf's cell seeking his targets. Fortunately, one of the two was the same paladin he had come for. He found the mage first. His keys were in the lock before the human could even rouse himself. Trevor was forced to slap the man to force the recently tortured bastard to wake up. "Traitor," the man muttered, registering his companion. He coughed violently and did not yet stand, but the cleric was content that he was awake and would rise in time. He left the Arcanist's cell. The girl, in contrast, snapped to attention immediately as he approached. Blood, mostly dry but some still fresh from a recent wound, gave most of the exposed skin on her arms and face an unearthly red color. It matched well with the fire still burning fiercely in her eyes. When she noticed who approached, her first reaction was a moment of recognition, then shock. Trevor bowed. "Good evening, my princess." Okay, the Burning Legion is another threat. I'm sure you've all heard of the horrors wrought by the demons in the Third War, if you haven't experienced them yourselves. Thousands died to the might of Archimonde's warriors, but the battle at Mount Hyjal decisively turned things back in the favor of mortals. That is no longer the case. We have squandered our victory. Rather than press for a finishing strike, the Alliance and the Horde allowed the surviving demons to linger, corrupt our friends and allies, and seek reinforcements from their internal masters. Lord Kazakh and the Tainted Scar, if given guidance from a greater demon, stands ready to conquer the regions nearby with minimal opposition. He could perhaps reopen the Dark Portal as well. Demons mass at Dark Whisper Gorge, their plans unknown. Felwood's corruption spreads with each passing day, as does the power of the Shadow Council that resides within its borders. We've also all heard by now that Illidan is alive and up to no good as usual in everyone's favorite hellhole Outland. Seems like he's got a good number of demons following him too, and I'm sure that's the only reason Kil'jaeden keeps him around. Only time will tell what Illidan's plans are, but we can't allow any more races to get sucked into his plans like the Blood Elves did. Poor bastards. Kael'thas was a good lad. A real pity things came to this. We need to do something about the Legion, orcs and humans alike. Fringe groups of crazy orcs like the Burning Blade are bad enough, but we've got real demons to deal with now, and it's only a matter of time before they bring their numbers to bear, and it's not going to be pretty. Okay, so within that, let's look at the various, strong ones. There's Lord Kazakh. Let's start by talking about our good old friend Kazakh and the Blasted Lands. Kazakh is clearly the main threat here in terms of sheer power and influence, but he lacks the initiative necessary to storm Nethergard or push towards the Horde settlements in the Swamp of Sorrows. Okay, is that maybe Razlich or Razalich the Defiler? I certainly wouldn't forget about Kazakh, but there's a more immediate threat to the Horde, Razalik the Defiler. Razalik is a powerful dreadlord who has claimed the Blasted Lands as his seat, and he steadily expands his influence, corrupting some of the Horde and Alliance's best, or turning them into monsters under his control. I've heard reports that one of the lieutenants sent to investigate was turned into a monstrous fell beast. We need this dreadlord dead, and right quick. I frankly have no idea how the dreadlord became so powerful, but he has granted boons, some say even immortality, to the greatest of his servants. The three servants who serve as Razalik's enforcers, Alistarj, Savine, and Groll, each control a fairly considerable group of followers. Alistarj was a powerful mage of the Kirin Tor before being corrupted, and he tricked many of his fellows into following him into his fall from grace. Now these pitiful magi are almost completely under his control. Sorry, guys. Not much is known about Lady Savine, but she leads a group of warlocks near an altar of storms overlooking the Dark Portal. I suspect they plan to reopen the portal, but this is pure speculation. Roll controls the large group of ogres inhabiting the Legion. All three are extremely dangerous, but they only control a fraction of Razalik's power. Razalik's most dangerous power is his ability to bind the souls of the fallen to a crystal through some wicked spell of unknown origins. This grants the person, or rather the body, bound to the crystal near immortality, but a complete lack of free will. Razalik has used this to begin creating an army of nigh and vulnerable guardians for his areas of interest, including the Dark Portal. Someone needs to get down there and find the source of this dreadlord's power, else he will push his way further into both Alliance and Horde lands. I suspect he may have connections with whatever is controlling Karazhan right now, but it's hard to know. Even I haven't been able to make my way into that dreaded tower just yet, and let's read here about Karazhan. Karazhan is another point of interest. I have no information to confirm that a demon is in fact what is controlling the ghosts and ogres nearby. Is it? I don't think so. But I find it unlikely any other being would be capable of the gruesome murders that occur in Deadwind Pass. There are tales that Terran Gorfin, the dreaded Death Knight from the Second War, has taken possession of the tower. This is entirely possible, but I suspect a much more ancient evil is responsible for the chaos linked to the tower. In fact, it is entirely possible that it is the most ancient of all evils controlling Medivh's former home, Sargeras himself. I once spoke to Anduin Lothar about his final battle with his childhood friend, and he described to me something peculiar, an essence or a spirit fleeing Medivh's body as he died. While we do know that Medivh has since reappeared in the world resurrected in the flesh or as a ghost, it is possible that what Lothar saw was not Medivh's soul, but rather the essence of Sargeras that had been trapped in his body since his birth. It's entirely possible, and in my opinion likely, that Sargeras' spirit lingers within the tower and perhaps eventually found a host as well. If this is the case, we're in for some deep trouble down the line. We're talking about the Lord of the Burning Legion here. We all know how much trouble he caused when he possessed Medivh. There's going to be a lot of blood spilled if we don't find out if he's back and deal with him soon, and hopefully more permanently this time. How would one banish Sargeras, you ask? That's a question for the Titans, my friend, or perhaps an aspect. I'll get right on it. Okay, and the surrounding area is Dark Whisper Gorge. That's interesting that they're considering this whole area to be Burning Legion territory. While the fraction of Sargeras' essence that may exist in Karazhan is just a rumor, other demonic threats exist that are much more tangible. The most obvious of these is the massive military force still inhabiting Dark Whisper Gorge. Where is that? Okay, maybe I'm thinking Deadwind Pass. I investigated Dark Whisper Gorge while writing Lands of Mystery, and let me tell you, it ain't pretty. Not in the least. Those demons aren't going to be kicked out of the gorge anytime soon, either. And it's not from any lack of trying. 3 dragonflights stand against them, vigilant over Mount Hyjal, but something tells me they can't do it alone. The Argent Dawn and other organizations do their best to help, but most of these smallish groups don't have the manpower to make a dent in a demon army. Since we don't really know what this group is up to or who's organizing them, I'm not going to try to persuade anyone to order a major call to arms yet. The Horde's resources are likely better spent dealing with Razalik and Karazhan, as well as finding other locations where demons might be lurking. Okay, and generic dreadlords. A number of dreadlords other than Razalik survived the Third War, and many of them make a major impact with their skills at deception. And that's true. And what are the ones that came out in Shadow? Are those? I guess maybe those are dreadlords. Lord Bane in Shadowlands. I'm trying to think what those things are called. The ones that are behind really everything. Lord Banehollow, something of a demonic politician and thus beyond even our normal concept of evil, serves as the emissary between the Burning Legion's remaining leaders and the Shadow Council. Kill him a lot. I'm serious. Just go into Shadowhold and Felwood and kill him. Taking out leaders like him could cripple communication between the Legion and their mortal allies, which would help a great deal to disperse the current threat. There are strong rumors that would indicate a demon is pulling some strings in the Scarlet Crusade, too. We know that to be true. Sure would explain why they aren't right in the head. That's definitely something to look into. I'm sure our buddy Varamathras would find it especially interesting. And finally, for the Burning Legion, there's the Manorock Coven. There's demonic activity in Deathless, but the Horde already investigates that, so I won't dwell on it in great depth. In essence, the Manorock Coven, named, of course, after our good old buddy Manoroth, opens small portals for more demons to enter the world. I've heard talk of a Lord Azrathok running the show here, but I know almost nothing about him. Fortunately, Thrall already seems to have a good grasp on the situation here, and I'm confident it will be under control soon enough. In conclusion, the biggest threat from the Burning Legion right now is that we don't really know where the leaders are or what they're up to. You can be sure that there are plans to make a portal great enough for Kil'jaeden to invade sometime in the future, but in the meantime, the Legion's highest-ranking members remain elusive. Now would be an ideal time to strike while the Legion at least appears vulnerable. If we could destroy most of the demonic remnants now, it could at least buy the Alliance and the Horde enough time to prepare for the next major invasion. Several key targets such as the World Trees need to be protected at all costs. It was Nordrassil that destroyed Archimonde, and we may need the power of nature again if the demons push further into our world. Okay, the Alliance is another big threat. I'm none too pleased about it, but the humans seem intent on picking a fight with the Horde, even now. Let me make this clear. I've bashed a lot of orc heads over the years, but my skull ain't thick enough to try to do it when I'm surrounded by other enemies. We've got a lot of fools in the Alliance, and sadly, most of our leaders are among them. The so-called war between the Alliance and the Horde threatens to rip both our affiliations asunder. While the Alliance lacks strong leadership these days, they still have the numbers and the zeal to consistently cross horns with the War Chief's forces. The real threat here isn't wiping each other out so much as drawing attention away from more immediate threats. It's unlikely the Horde or the Alliance will sack any of the opposing major cities soon, for example, but their skirmishes open holes for the Burning Legion, the Scourge, and other nasties to sneak through. Most of the aggression from the Alliance's side started with the followers of Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, and some of them are still around on the coast of Kalimdor. More importantly, however, Dalen's entire nation is still out there. We haven't heard much from Kultiras these days, but Proudmoore's son is in charge there. Oh, I didn't know about that. The Horde needs to be ready for another possible assault if Kultiras decides to bring its ships to bear, but it would be more logical to start making negotiations for peace with them now. Like Gilneas, though I am loath to make the comparison, Kultiras has always functioned somewhat independently from the rest of the Alliance. It would be wise to get Jaina to take a boat out there with Thrall, or teleport or something, and get a treaty signed. It would be a first step toward peace, and I suspect Jaina could convince her little brother to do it if the Horde is willing to take the risk. Something to consider. It's interesting just how far back, like, some of the things that happen in BFA are already considered. The Alliance remains dominant in the Eastern Kingdoms, and though the majority of the Horde has little invested there, the Forsaken to continue to hold the Tristful Glades, a fact that infuriates the human nations. It's likely that if Stormwind ever gets its act together, the Forsaken will be hit first, as completely illogical as that might be. It has nothing to do with who they are. I'm sure even those fools at Kel'Thuzad, fools know that Kel'Thuzad is a greater threat. Rather, the fact that Sylvanas inhabits the ruins of the once proud Lordaeron makes her a more likely first target. There's no logic to it, just pure human pride. You'll find that human pride guides a lot of their stupid ideas. If the Forsaken just moved out of Lordaeron City, that would be a huge step toward the possibility of diplomacy, but I simply don't see the Banshee Queen being interested. Okay? The Horde has a lot more firepower in Kalimdor than the Alliance, but not by much. Night Elves dominate northern Kalimdor, and Theramore retains a strong military presence even after the death of Dalen Proudmoore. Fortunately for Thrall and company, neither the Elves nor the people of Theramore have much interest in attacking the major Horde cities. That could change if the Horde presses too far into Ashenvale, however, and such a battle would be decimating for both sides. Hey, Warsongs, why cut down the trees, an elf-dominated territory, and antagonize the Alliance further when other locations such as Feralis are nowhere near as contested? Just food for thought. Okay, and the Scourge is, of course, a threat as well. The frozen armies of the Lich King will not stop at the slaughter of Lordaeron, nor at the defeat of the Forsaken and the Alliance if they are successful. This unholy army threatens every living creature, and it may take every living creature to stop them. The Horde may have more nightmares about the Burning Legion, but the Scourge poses just as great of a long-term threat. Only recently has the Scourge dared to expand back into Kalimdor, and the primary focus is on an unusual location, the Razorfen Downs in the Barrens. There, Amnemnar, the Coldbringer, a lich, has corrupted a solid half of the native Quillbores. In addition, he brought another undead along with him, such as ghouls and a fearsome abomination. I didn't realize that was part of what's happening in Razorfen Downs. While this may not seem like a major threat, I recently learned that the Coldbringer has a direct telepathic connection with the Lich King. This fact changes the scenario a bit, with Amnemnar controlling the Quillbores and the Lich King guiding him directly. This lone Lich could be a considerable threat. Due to his location in the Barrens, it appears that the Lich intends to throw his army directly against the Horde settlements in the Barrens. Not a good thing, considering this would put the Horde between a Scourge force in the south and the Alliance-dominated force in the north of Kalimdor. While I'm sure the Alliance isn't fond of the idea of an army of undead Quillbores either, it is unlikely that the Alliance would send much or any aid to deal with the Lich until far after it's too late. It's also important to consider that this is just the first sign of Scourge activity in Kalimdor since the Battle of Mount Hyjal. The Lich King is growing bold by attacking the living on all fronts, not just in Northrend and the Eastern Kingdoms. There are Necromantic Centaur and Desolus, which is something to keep in mind, but it would appear more likely that the Legion, not the Scourge, influences these tribes. Okay, I didn't even realize there were Necromantic Centaur. I guess they do, like, deal with ghosts and stuff. Okay, here's another sidebar called, Ask Not What the Horde Can Do For You. As one might guess, there are a lot of roles heroes might take within the Horde. The Horde still needs every strong sword it can get, but less traditional roles like healers, assassins, and politicians are just as important. A group of heroes might focus on trying to improve relations with a specific group such as the Zandalar tribe, the Argent Dawn, or the Steamweedle Cartel. Perhaps with enough persuasion, the goblins can be convinced to rejoin the Horde for the first time since the Second War, although that could be just as harmful as helpful knowing the goblins. Being a member of the Horde has a different meaning to every individual. Rexar, the Horde's champion, is an excellent example. Though he was given the option to reside with Thrall and Orgrimmar, the champion has chosen to live his life in the wild, supporting the Horde and the world in general, in his own unique way. Some see the true Horde as being the orcs, while with everyone else, allies, if even that. Others are proud to think of the Tauren, Trolls, and sometimes the Forsaken as their fellow members of the Horde. Some would say that any man or woman who has pledged a sword to Thrall is part of the Horde. It is the player's decision how they chose to interpret the character's membership within the Horde. It is possible a traditional orc might disagree with them, however. There are a number of ways a hero can aid or harm the Horde. Taking a small group or any army against the enemies of the Horde, such as the Burning Legion, could help ensure a safe future. Secretly meeting with the Alliance to forge a plan for peace could also be beneficial depending on a hero's perspective. Gathering much-needed supplies or helping to set up a new city could help the Horde expand into new territory. Or simply exploring and mapping uncharted territory could give the Horde's leadership an idea of new places to focus on or avoid. On the other side of the coin, spreading misinformation, assassinating key members of the Horde, and aiding groups like the Shadow Council are just a few ways a hero could strike out against the Horde. A powerful PC might assassinate Jaina Proudmoore, and implicate a key member of the Horde as being responsible, or start any number of other conspiracies. That would be like world-bending. A double agent might gain the trust of the Horde, then turn her information over to her real masters or just the highest bidder. There are other simple ways to harm the Horde as well. Supporting leaders like Magath the Grim Totem could help to tear the Tauren apart from the inside. One might slip to Vera Mathras that his brother is alive and seeking vengeance on Sylvanas, then again, perhaps he already knows his brother is alive. The possibilities are nearly endless. Heroes have an amazing amount of potential to influence the Horde for better or worse. They simply have to choose how they wish to roll the dice. Haha, little D&D pun. The Eastern Kingdoms are a whole different world in terms of Scourge activity, back to the Scourge. While this might not seem like a major threat to the Horde now, undead activity threatens the Horde in several key locations. Large numbers of undead with unknown leadership linger in the lands of Duskwood and the Deadwind Pass. These could easily be turned against the Horde establishments in and around the Swamp of Sorrows. We all know about the problems in the Plaguelands already, but it's easy to forget that it's not just crazy Scarlets fighting the Scourge. The Forsaken lose, people to the Lich King's army every day. Kel'Thuzad remains furious at Sylvanas' betrayal, and I believe it will not be long before he turns the might of Naxxramas against the Banshee Queen. Though Lady Windrunner is indeed formidable, I do not believe any single faction on this world could stand up to the full might of the Scourge, and that is exactly what she may have to face very, very soon. As adventurers learn more and more about the corruption within the Scarlet Crusade, it becomes increasingly likely it will fall apart. If that happens, the Scourge will reign virtually uncontested in the Eastern Plaguelands. Sorry, the little Argent Dawn isn't going to stand up to that kind of firepower for long. With Tyr's hand under the control of the Scourge, Hearthglen would be unlikely to mount much resistance, in spite of Lord Talon Fordring's skill in battle. I'm not just randomly speculating here. It's looking like the Forsaken will have to handle the Scourge alone soon enough unless the Horde rallies and grants them massive support. I'm not a big fan of anyone dead and still walking. Sorry, Sylvanas, but if the Scourge consumes the Forsaken, we're all going to end up real dead. Northrend is also something to consider, though not as much of an immediate danger. Mortals still fight there, Horde and Alliance alike, and if we could secure the area around Stratholme, reinforcing them would be possible. Right now, with Stratholme in Kel'Thuzad's hands, the Scourge has a method of summoning a nearly infinite supply of reinforcements. Clearly not a good thing. And then we've got Baron Rivendare to deal with, too. Just a reminder, he's a real bastard. I'm hoping the Frostworms don't come knocking anytime soon. That reminds me, it would be good to send some help to the Blue Dragons so we don't end up with any more Frostworms. It's a no-brainer, but somehow both the Alliance and the Horde haven't picked up on the idea of working directly with the dragons yet. The Night Elves used to, sure, but I don't see too much cooperation with the Dragonflights these days, with a few rare exceptions like those crazy kids at Hyjal. Not much else to say, really. Action needs to be taken, and if the Alliance is too lazy or caught up in their damn politics to do it, it falls to the Horde. War Chief, look to quell the loss in Lordaeron. You've seen what the Lich King could do even before his powers were increased to his unholy pact with Arthas. Please pay my words heed, and help me to convince the Alliance and the Horde to turn their swords in a more reasonable direction. And that feels like final. That feels like this is almost the last we're going to hear from Bran in this book, because like I said, the rest is very RP heavy, very stat block heavy. So that might, in a way, be the end of this book, but we'll glance at the rest of it in future episodes. Okay, hey everybody. I hope you enjoyed this run, this episode. I know there's been a lot of audio clutter on this one, a lot of audio pollution, and I apologize for that. It's try to coordinate these things as much as I can for the ebbs and flows of family and home life, and anybody that has family and home, everyone almost does. I'm sure you get it, but hey, I appreciate it, and things will improve. Give it time. Trust me, if you can watch a show that has 940 something episodes, then you got patience. We'll get there. Thanks everybody, and I look forward to seeing y'all on Lore of Warcraft.